Hi, and welcome to another episode of Dead Times, the only horror movie podcast recorded in a secluded country house that the basement has black mold in. I'm your host, Peter, and with me, as always, is the guy currently hypnotizing me with his tea, Tim. Tim, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine. Thanks for having me.
And today we have extra special guest April joining us. April, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
We're very glad to have you.
Today we are going to be talking about the movie Get Out, which is nominated for a whole slew of Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actor for Daniel Kaluuya.
And is the highest rated comedy in the history of Rotten Tomatoes.
It was
Even higher than Showgirl.
That is hard to believe. But it was, in fact, nominated at the Golden Globes for Best Musical or Comedy. So that's something going in its favor.
Doesn't anybody think about any of this shit at all?
Yeah, because I am like such a non-Academy Award person, because after Julia Roberts beat out for some reason her name is escaping me, but she was the mom in Requiem for a Dream, which is probably one of the best performances I've ever watched, and I've watched a lot of films. And that year, Ellen Burstyn, Julia Roberts won for Erin Brockovich, and to me that was like a huge travesty. So I really don't give any credence to anything the Academy has to say or their opinion on anything.
I think I definitively stopped caring when Arrival was not nominated for Best Score, because I thought Arrival had the best movie score I'd seen in like 10 years, and it was not even nominated.
The Academy Awards are deep bullshit.
Yeah.
Not quite as deep bullshit as the Emmys or the Grammys.
Well, it's just a bunch of people just congratulating themselves on being mediocre. So
yeah.
Although at least this year they're not in large part they're not congratulating themselves for being mediocre and white.
Yeah.
Touche.
I'm sure the nominations Get Out has received have pretty much nothing to do with the fact that the Academy has suddenly changed its mind about horror, but have a lot to do with the fact that the Academy is starting to look at movies that are not by white people for white people, particularly by rich white people for rich white people.
Well, if you think about like the movie, and like I'm always suspicious of movies when I see certain types of movies show up that specifically are made to get Academy Awards, and that bothers me so much because it's just
The fabled Oscar bait.
Yeah, and like one of my favorite episodes, extras, is when Kate Winslet shows up and she goes into this monologue about what she has to do in order to get an Academy Award, and I think it's like so spot on. And it's I don't know. I think either you should just eliminate it completely or just find a better way to do it.
Yeah, because like obviously we watch horror movies on this podcast, and we've watched some Academy Award nominated movies because Carrie, both Sissy Spacek and Piper Laurie were nominated for Academy Awards for their performances in Carrie. But like if you look, they didn't win. If you look across all the major categories, almost no horror movies have ever won, and it's really, really hard to believe in the 75 plus years history of the Academy Awards that the only horror movies that were worthy of getting an Academy Award were The Silence of the Lambs and then Rosemary's Baby.
Which is crazy. I mean, there's so many like amazing horror films in the history of film. For that to be a statistic is appalling.
Yeah, and
it's
the
absurd.
thing is, it's not just horror. It's also sci-fi. It's also
definitely.
fantasy.
Comedy.
Comedies. I think Marissa Tomei was like one of the few people that actually won an Academy Award for a comedic role. I think Whoopi Goldberg. Heath Ledger won one year. So if I'm not mistaken, didn't he win for supporting actor for The Dark Knight Returns? Or am I not remembering that correctly?
It might be Brokeback Mountain.
It was
I think Heath Ledger won Best Supporting Actor for The Dark Knight, but it was posthumous.
Yeah, okay.
And if he hadn't died in between the release of the movie,
maybe he wouldn't have won.
And the Academy Awards, he really might not. That's the thing, is that the Academy is really fickle, and so you tend to not even. I don't even like to ascribe the best of intentions to when they do something I approve of, like nominating Get Out for a bunch of shit. I think that's mostly to cover their ass for all the controversy a year ago about how there were like 4 black people nominated for any awards.
Yeah, I mean, you can't tell me that Sidney Poitier was the only African-American actor in like from the dawn of film until the 60s that was worthy of an Academy Award.
Yeah.
And he's kind of still one of the few actors who's gotten an Academy Award that is not a white a white man.
Yeah.
A white man.
A white man, like Principal Blackman. Okay, this is important right.
Yeah, but
yeah, I think Daniel. How do you pronounce his last name?
Daniel Kaluuya.
Kaluuya.
Yeah.
I think it's Kaluuya.
Kaluuya. Oh yeah, Daniel Kaluuya was on Colbert the other night, and he was saying, he was even talking about this. He was saying, I've seen I saw Get Out 3 times. This is like the new I would have voted for Obama a third time. That it's the easy the quick shortcut to demonstrating that you're not racist.
Yeah.
Is being like, man, I really loved Get Out, man. Like that was saying some important shit. Which is going to be me on this show, because I did really love Get Out, and I am a white man.
Well,
But,
I'm also a white man too, so we are fellow members of the white man family.
Don't ever say that, man.
Well, I mean,
So-
I have one minority thing about me, so I can slide by.
Oh yeah, we're gonna play that game. No, I am not a white man, that's for sure. But I was pleasantly surprised, because I'm not a huge fan of Jordan Peele, so that made me hesitant to like watch it. I'm not like a huge horror fan either, but Peter.
Get off this podcast. Get out. Get out.
Get out!
Get out.
Get the fuck no.
No, I literally at work, whenever I want someone to leave, I say, "Do you remember that movie that was that horror movie? What was its title?" It was the one directed by Jordan Peele, and they're like, "Get out!" I'm like, "That's what you need to do right now."
Yes. See, now that's gonna replace pork chop sandwiches for me. So, but yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. It was like, it's a great blender movie, and it's just really cleverly done. There are like so many like little nuggets of things that just kind of lays out what kind of movie that you're watching, and I love that. There's subtlety to it. There's tension. There's drama. There's humor. It's just a really well done film.
It's like the definition of a slow burn.
Yeah.
It moves at a snail's pace, just building this unpleasantness and just like showing all of these things that like could be taken as normal, but there's just enough of there's something being off in just every little facet of what goes on that it makes you uncomfortable, and then it eventually just kind of spirals out of control.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a big Key and Peele fan either. I've never watched the show. I might like it for all I know, but I've never watched it. I liked them in the first season of Fargo, but that's really all that I knew Jordan Peele from prior to seeing this.
Well, for me, it's more of like the latter seasons of Mad TV, and it was just like when it was in that decline, and it was just like, yeah, I can't deal with this.
Yeah,
so I've always
about those seasons
too.
Yeah. Well, one of the more interesting things about this movie is the fact that a lot of the people involved in it come from comedy. Jordan Peele, obviously, but like Catherine Keener is very famous.
Oh my God, she's so good. The casting in this movie is so good. I mean, it's just like when something like a film comes along where the writing's really good, the direction's really good, and the casting and the acting is good, you're gonna walk away feeling like you had a really good time watching something.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much about this movie that's really unpleasant, and yet it's a really fun movie to watch.
Oh yeah, but at the same time, I still think calling it a comedy is ridiculous.
It is.
Yeah,
ridiculous.
It has humor.
It is comedic. It's funny, but again, there are moments of The Shining that make me laugh out loud. That is a horror movie, and this is a horrifying movie. And lumping it in the horror comedy genre, saying that this is the equivalent of something like Creepshow or something, I think is ludicrous.
Well, that kind of brings it back to like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because people didn't know how to classify it, because it was a little bit of everything. It was a little bit of a soap opera, it was a little bit of fantasy, it was a little, I mean, if you want to like a loosely like martial arts or whatever like that, it was a soap opera. It was like an amalgam of things that no one can actually pin down, so they just automatically gave it a category, or they just like completely dismissed it at all, because it was, at the end of the day, it was a silly show about vampires. And I think that's the same thing that happens when you take a genre film or any film that isn't a straight comedy or straight drama or a straight romance. You see bits and pieces of it, and then you just automatically assign it a category because you don't know how to define it, which is stupid.
We talk a lot about how genres are big, expansive things, and you have something like, I don't know, Jaws, that is pretty clearly part of one genre, but has all these different shadings of different genres sprinkled in. And like, particularly with the Academy Awards, they don't seem to actually appreciate that good filmmaking sometimes requires an amalgamation of taking great things from like one genre and another genre and another genre. And when you actually label, well, this movie movie is fantasy. This movie is horror. This movie is sci-fi. What you're really doing is either retroactively looking at it or you're marketing it. People who like this sort of thing.
That's spot on.
And part of what we enjoy about this podcast, we've said it before, is that we think that horror, as in particularly with this movie, has enormous socio-political things to say, has enormous artistic merit, and it gets dismissed because of the fact that it is a horror movie. That is ridiculous. That's as ridiculous as saying, well, like, all sci-fi movies are, you know, stupid aliens killing people or whatever. But that is, in particular with the Academy Awards, that is the way they treat these things.
Well, yeah, and the Academy still seems to feel that way about science fiction mostly. You know, the Academy, the Academy tends to not really like mixed genre movies, but it also tends to not really like genre movies, period. They like dramas.
Right.
You know, that's really all that it seems like if they give any attention to anything that isn't a straight drama, you know, whether it's an action movie or a science fiction movie or a fantasy or a horror or a comedy, it tends to be sort of begrudging. And it'll, you know, they'll do it just as a gesture, you know, like, so a couple years ago, okay, I guess we have to nominate Fury Road for Best Picture. But of course it didn't win, which is ridiculous because Fury Road is clearly the best movie of that year.
They will never award an animated movie Best Picture.
No, that's why that's
why they have a category for it, you know.
Yeah, that pisses me off maybe more than anything else about the Academy Awards, because like everything else is just, technically speaking, it's just how it plays out, and you know, everything else you can chalk up to how they tend to vote. But there's prejudice against animation, you know, which animation, you know, we've talked about this a bit before. We talked about an animated movie just a little while ago. Animation is an art form that means a lot to me. And it's the only one that is actively discriminated against just by how the award system is set up, because there's a separate category for it, which implies that they have just assumed that it's never going to win Best Picture and that it's best to just relegate it to its own category just so that it doesn't have to compete.
I would put any Miyazaki movie in contention for any film that has won an Academy Award in the last 15 to 20 years.
The fact that WALL-E was not nominated for Best Picture is mind-bogglingly insane. Like, yeah. WALL-E is a borderline perfect movie.
And yet Avatar was. And Avatar is a terrible movie. It's basically WALL-E minus, like, the good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it was if WALL-E was boring.
Yeah, and just ridiculously stupid. I am a huge animation fan too, and for me, I think the voice acting that you find in animation is way harder than you have Julia Roberts pushed up in a leopard print bra spouting nonsense. You know, it's just,
you're just never gonna let that go, are you?
No, I'm just like, because I remember it now. I'm just like really pissed off, and it's been like 20 years. So yeah.
Well, like Andy Serkis has given so many amazing performances that will never be acknowledged,
which is insane.
His performance as Gollum is
oh my god, yes.
It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
I'm not gonna I like literally cried during those scenes that you see Gollum in a cave, and he, you know, he becomes such a sympathetic character, and I was just like bawling, and that's all due to his voice acting, which is like, I'd like to see Julia Roberts do that. She can't because she sucks.
Well, like I think voice actors are horribly underappreciated.
Oh, definitely, and underpaid.
Yeah, and it specifically bothered me with the movie Her. The only reason why that movie works is because you know Scarlett Johansson is voicing that character. It doesn't work just because of the fact that the voice is that incredibly powerful. I think if they had gotten like Cree Summer or
like if I would have watched it.
Yeah, if they had gotten like a real
voice actor.
Like, and that's the thing in movies in general, is that there are all these amazing voice actors that work in TV, and then when people make an animated movie, they tend to just cast Hollywood actors. Like there was that movie Epic a few years ago that the main voice was Colin Farrell. Like I like Colin Farrell, but Colin Farrell does not have a particularly distinctive voice, and so that was a role that could have gone to John DiMaggio or to Tom Kenny or to you know lots of great voice actors that are out there working
Maurice
right now.
LaMarche.
But they wanted to have a name to put on the poster.
Yeah, it's like, okay,
that's really all it is.
Who's your target audience? Kids? Okay, who are kids watching? SpongeBob?
Yeah, kids don't care. Kids don't know who Colin Farrell is, and they won't for like 10 years after watching your stupid movie.
Seriously, oh god, I feel like we kind of derailed our own train just now.
That's fine. I'm The more train crashes that happen on this podcast, the happier I am.
Yeah, I've been saying this for a while that we need to be. The key to a good discussion podcast is to welcome the tangents.
But,
because people don't listen to hosts that aren't entertaining just because they happen to be interested in the subject they're talking about. If anything, the opposite is true.
Well, usually when I have a conversation, I like to bring it back to the original point. I call it, "Oh, we've come full circle." When we get to that point, I'll say it. But yeah,
sometimes you have to hunt for a while.
Well, it's like just the insane system that Hollywood operates under is mind-boggling. I mean, from the early years that it existed, it's been mind-boggling, and a lot has not changed. And it's really weird that we live in this day and age, and it's like that same garbage.
Yeah, that's only just starting to get dismantled.
Yeah, they call it a machine, and it is definitely a machine.
A machine made of flesh and blood.
Yeah, I mean...
The machine is people.
Hollywood is made out of people.
It's sort of like in The Critic, that one episode where he's writing the sequel to...
Our horror movie podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, Soylent Green is a horror movie.
No, let him finish. Let him finish.
But yeah, but in the TV show The Critic, where he's writing the sequel to what is clearly a knockoff of Ghostbusters, and... He's like, all right, well, I'm going to make this the best ever possible. Well, actually, his literal statement is, I'm going to write the sequel to a movie I don't think they should have made in the first place. And his goal is to make it the best possible movie ever. And he turns in the script, and the Hollywood executive goes, oh, this is the best script I've ever read in my entire life. It'll never get made. And then he throws it in a pile, and Jay Sherman's like, well, what's this pile? And he's like, these are movies that are just too good to be made. And then he starts going through, this is a lesbian love story. This is a drama about 18th century France. And he's like, no one's going to see these movies. Can you imagine Arnold Schwarzenegger starring in one of these movies?
Yeah, that's perfect commentary. That is absolutely perfect.
Now
commentary.
A24 is there to make those movies.
And Blumhouse is also there to make these movies, because this is Get Out is a Blumhouse movie, which also made the Insidious movies that we've talked about. It made Happy Death Day. It made the Purge movies. And Jason Blum, who is the owner of Blumhouse, this is actually the second time that he's been nominated for an Academy Award for Best Picture. First one was for Whiplash with J.K. Simmons.
Oh, that's the one with the wrestling dude.
No, that's Foxcatcher. That was
no, it's like the kid is the kids are into wrestling, and he's like the
no, it's about
dad
drumming.
Or something like
jazz drumming.
Okay.
Yeah, it's by the guy who made La La Land, except for the fact that it seems to be a better version of La La Land.
I haven't seen it, so I mean I can't say one way or other. I mean
I haven't seen it either. I should do, because I love J.K. Simmons.
I mean, J.K. Simmons will always be Vernon Chillinger from Oz.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, he's always going to be a little bit J. Jonah Jameson. That's what I grew up seeing him as.
I will never see him as Commissioner Gordon, though.
That seems...
I don't know. I thought that was like the only I was really surprised when that news came out, because I was like, whoa, like the DC extended universe made a good casting choice.
Well, they got Viola Davis as Amanda Waller.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, and Affleck makes an all right Batman. Isn't given anything to work with.
Yeah, no, that's the problem with that. That's the problem with that entire cinematic universe in quotation.
Because it doesn't
except
know what
Wonder Woman.
It is, except for Wonder Woman, which was surprisingly good.
Against all odds, it actually was really, really good.
Yeah.
Because it mostly didn't have anything to do with the rest of that quote unquote cinematic universe.
Yeah.
Get Out.
Oh, Get Out. We were talking about Get Out. Yeah, what was everyone's initial thoughts about this movie?
Well, from the opening scene, I was like, oh, this is a callback to all of the horror movies where you have the blonde walking in some kind of isolated area, and all of a sudden we get introduced to our slasher killer. It always happens within the first 5 to 10 minutes of the film. And it's interesting because it flips the script in terms of it's one, it's a dude, and second, it's a black dude. And I love the fact that he gets picked up in his white car.
That's playing really old-timey music.
Yeah, it's really great. And the further along you get into movies, you realize that it's already setting the tone for everything, and it's leaving a little bit of clues to what's happening later on in the film, which is you see bits and pieces when you're trying to figure out how they fit together, and it's that was pretty damn clever.
Yeah, I mean, we've discussed a lot of movies that had prologues, particularly the Scream movies, and this is one of the best versions of that, because normally
it's really good.
Normally what happens in a horror movie is that something is invading the safe space. And that's why so many horror movies take place in the suburbs, is because, well, they're all from the 80s, and the suburbs are where, like, people went to be safe. And then you have Freddy Krueger invading the suburb. But in this movie, like, literally the very concept of suburbia is presented as dangerous and frightening, whereas the inner city has warmth and light and happiness.
Well, you get that contrast after what happens in the beginning. And when you just said that, it just reminded me of the opposite in terms of how when any people of color enter the suburbs, that they're automatically seen as being suspicious. So, like,
it's what neighborhood watches are for.
Yeah.
It's all they're for.
That's all. Yeah. And it flips the script because the most terrifying thing happens to the person that is seen as the outsider or the threat. So, I mean, that's clever in and of itself, I think.
Yeah, and it is sort of the crux of this movie.
Well, anytime I see, like, Kathleen Keener, I'm automatically suspicious because I know she's going to do something terrible to somebody.
And that's Bradley Whitford for me.
Oh God,
I'm not going to trust that motherfucker.
He's so good.
Look at him.
Well, the last thing I've seen him in, he plays Jake Peralta's dad in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and he's so skeevy, and I didn't know he could be that funny. And so to see him, like, play this guy, and when he says, "Yeah, this is the proudest moment in our family," I'm like paraphrasing or whatever, and he shows like a picture of his dad, and he's like, he ran against Jesse Owens in the preliminaries for the 1936 Olympics. He was like, yeah, he lost to Jesse Owens. He almost got over that. And it was just like, okay, I see where this is headed.
He is really funny in this movie, though. He's like,
yeah,
how long has
so
this
this
thing been going on?
My man.
This is just the Rick and Morty. My man.
Like,
in a weird way, the first act of this movie is harder to watch than the third act because it's so real.
It's so, I like the fact that they're driving in a Lincoln. And it's like, okay, it's a little bit of product placement, but it's like, it's perfect product placement because Lincoln is the emancipator, the great emancipator, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have like this kid, he's going to go meet his white girlfriend. They look wealthy, so I'm going to say her wealthy parents.
Oh yeah, they seem
got,
stupid rich.
Yeah, and they've got like servants like of color, and so it's like kind of set, and it kind of looks like a plantation house. So you've got like
it's like you're going back in time.
Yeah, and it gives you that like sense and like little beads of foreshadowing that you see, and like that Lincoln. And then how do you guys do with spoilers? Because I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, we're fine with spoilers. We'll spoil the hell out of everything.
Okay, so when they hit the deer and you see the up close of that deer's eyes, and it's just like, oh,
what is the deal with deer lately? Like, we've just decided as a culture that deer are terrifying because like deer was a big thing in Hannibal. It's a big thing here. It's a big thing in the first season of True Detective.
Well, a deer is called a heart, so I think it's symbolic of the heart. I mean, that could just be my own interpretation of it. There's a certain serenity and purity to the deer, so I think it's a lot of symbolism that come with deer. Just from my general knowledge, is the only way I can probably answer your question in terms of that.
I thought it was just because they have dead little chicken eyes, but like that's a much smarter explanation. So I'll believe you.
And they came out of nowhere. That deer just, and I live like on the PA Turnpike, so occasionally you'll have deer like just fly out of nowhere and like fuck your car up.
Oh yeah, that happens all the time down here in Georgia. They're about as common as squirrels.
We got a lot of those. We got some ghetto ass squirrels up here too. No, I mean I saw a couple squirrels fighting over a French fry over a trash can. It was amazing.
It's like, well, I guess this is where the world is right now.
We have squirrel fights. I'm sorry, I got a little bit derailed, but
kind of fun, kind of sad.
But yeah, so it's like all these foreshadowing moments that you have, and he's like really happy. He's in love, and he thinks, and the more he becomes such a complex character. Like the more that you learn about him.
Let's talk about Chris Washington. He is an incredibly fascinating character. For one, that he doesn't really speak that much, but Daniel Kaluuya's face emotes so well. Mm-hmm. Like he is so good at emoting.
He's one of the best leads I've seen I've seen in a horror movie in a while. Just because as a central presence in the movie, it's so interesting because this is as we've been talking about a lot, this is a very racially charged movie. But Chris, whenever the issue of race comes, even when just the subject of race comes up, he tends to always want to not push the issue. That he's not there to. He doesn't feel like in every situation he has to be representing anything. That's not his responsibility. And so it's really his girlfriend that tends to speak up more often. And he just always feels really awkward about that. And so because people all throughout this movie are saying really questionable shit around him. But he's.
That is an understatement.
Yeah, but even just early on when it's sort of within they're saying stuff that if you were so inclined you could be okay. Well, hey, that's actually not really cool. Let me explain this to you so you could be more woke. But he never wants to do that. He's always just like, okay, let's just change the subject or exit somehow. I really like that just because it makes you just all the more sad that this happens to him.
Well, I love the fact that he's a photographer too.
Yeah, just that everything short of this would have been something that he was willing to let go. Like in that scene where they get hit by the deer and the cop comes and asks for his license even though he wasn't driving. And his girlfriend starts to think about it, but he's just fine. Just he's just like I'll give it to you just so that we can get out of here. He's not like I don't need to make a stand now because that's just going to become my day.
Well, because he's had many days like that, and
exactly.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, and that his girlfriend sticking her neck out for him to the extent that she does in that scene is actually really patronizing.
Exactly.
Which is kind of one of the first clues that something's not totally right.
Something's not right. Yeah. Like I said, I've watched a lot of movies that, that are racially charged and, try to introduce some kind of dialogue about race. And it's like, it's so heavy-handed and heavy-fisted. And it's like getting beat upside the head with a 2x4. And at some point you get like super exhausted by it that it's just like it just starts to piss you off and you're not angry, you just get angry at everything. But with this it's very like subtle moments that build and build and build until you get to like the final conclusion, and it's just like it makes the whole thing worthwhile. It's like a powder keg. You said it's like the great slow burn, and that's what makes it such an enjoyable film to watch, to see how this progresses, because it's like the small thing here and then it just like everything starts to creep up and you get everything's giving you pause until you get to this moment you're like, holy fucking shit, I'm in this situation now. And to see how they resolve that, and it's so satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, this movie is really, really good at portraying what is called microaggressions. Because, like, for people who don't understand what the concept is, because any one thing that any of these people say to Chris over the course of the movie, you'd be like, okay, well, that's whatever, not cool or stupid or ignorant or whatever you want to label it. But it's the fact that it just keeps happening. Every single person keeps saying, like, these sort of things to him. Starting with the police officer wanting his ID, and then, like, literally all of his girlfriend's family, all of the people at the party, like, they just keep saying these type of things to him. And so it's not like any one thing, it's all of them in cumulative.
But even that, the most authentic moment of like that kind of thing is the encounter with the police officer. So when we get to the other people and we find out what exactly is going on, it starts to make sense, and it's super weird how it flips on its head, in the sense that it wasn't so much microaggression, but it was projection, which I like. There's a psychological component to it that like really blew my mind away, because it was just so well crafted. And even like, I like to think I'm a very savvy film watcher, and even I didn't like catch on to that until like way after like that reveal happened, and it made me appreciate those moments that you had like during the party, which is like that was so insane.
Yeah, it's just you know that something is wrong when just everybody around you is walking up to you to shake hands to meet you, and then immediately begins setting about proving that they're not racist.
Right.
It's like, nice to meet you. Let me subtly give you some proof that I don't hate your race. Like, let me
Like the
talk to you at
Japanese
length about
dude.
all of the black men that I have such great admiration for. I think you'll really find that I'm a very evolved person, well worth talking to. Well, and that's the thing. That's part of what I think helps this movie avoid being heavy-handed, is that what it's talking about isn't racial hatred exactly. It's closer to racial fetishization.
Exactly.
And how that is absolutely no better because it ends up manifesting in much the same way.
Well, we get an objectification
Because they're both dehumanizing.
Yeah, which is also a very common trope in horror films but usually it's the blonde, blue-eyed girl that in most horror films are a manifestation of sexual desire or repression. So when we had that scene opening, when our introduction to Chris, when he's in the bathroom getting ready for his weekend, and you just basically see his like shredded body and him washing his face, it's all sexy, and it's like, okay, that is like kind of a variation on that the male gaze that you see in horror films.
Yeah, but it's the white gaze is what it is.
Exactly. And that's what like that. It's so good. It's just like I'm not keep saying it,
really
but it's just
smart.
like it's just like it's so well done. It's not too subtle, but it's subtle enough where it doesn't take away the surprise that because it's coming, but it doesn't take away the surprise when it actually happens.
Well, and of course,
I'm
sorry. This is my problem on the show, is that I interrupt people.
No, I'm sorry. I have the same problem.
Well, as long as we both do it.
Okay, cool.
Then
sorry.
It'll just be us two talking for the whole podcast, and Peter will just sit quietly. But why is it that blonde teenage girls in more traditional horror films, why is it that they die? It's why is it that people in masks kill them? The way movies portray them is generally that it's out of some really fucked up attraction to them. That goes back to Psycho. Is that the main archetype for the serial killer that we have in our movies are the people that, for whatever reason, their sexual desire manifests as violence. And so this is a movie about a different kind of desire that manifests as violence.
Exactly. And there's so much Hitchcock in here too. You've got Kubrick, you've got Hitchcock.
That's the other running thing on this podcast, is that I reference Hitchcock every episode. Hitchcock and Heathers.
We're like soulmates, dude. We're like total soulmates. Because Hitchcock is my favorite director. The way he crafts a scene if you were going to be a filmmaker, you should study the way he crafts a scene, because there's no other way it's just beautiful. It's brilliant the way he does it.
He knew what he was doing.
He knew exactly. One of my favorite films is Rope, and
Rope is an awesome movie. That's a really underrated movie.
It's so, that's like my favorite Hitchcock movie. And it happens all in one setting. And he has this
in one shot by and large, except that when they have to exchange it, it'll just, go over to someone's back or to a wall and fade out. And then, so they change the reel, and then it'll zoom back out. It's crazy. And
I kind of get like that same like level of tension in Get Out. You get like that Hitchcock tension in those scenes, like when he meets the servants, for lack of a better term, and there's something off with it, but you're not quite sure what it is. But like, and those actors they do so much with like very little dialogue.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, something's really off, and you're not quite sure what it is, but it's like these like micro expressions that they have that kind of like build that tension up to, we have achieved a point where this is not kosher, and the audience is starting to feel it, and it continues, up until we get through the parts that we get to that. I don't know. I was so pleasantly surprised how great this was.
Yeah, it's an amazing achievement, particularly with how deftly it handles race, since the entire thing is about race, but it's not like in the 80s and 90s when like Full House would have their very special episodes about race. Yeah, like this is the movie that you would show to someone who is mildly racist and doesn't think they're racist. When you're just like, I don't want to explain any of this stuff to you, so let's just watch Get Out. It's a horror movie.
Although, again, apparently all of those people love this movie, so I don't know. That reminds me, listeners, if I accidentally say anything really ignorant on this episode, please correct me.
I will totally correct you.
Yeah. I forgot.
West Philadelphia, born. No.
Yeah, because I've just always assumed that I'm probably slightly racist a little bit, just because I didn't really grow up around any black people at all. I grew up in the middle of relatively middle class Georgia, and I didn't really have any black friends as a kid, and I don't really have a lot now. So, like, I probably have prejudices that I'm not aware of, and I would like called out on them so that I may improve. So if any of that comes out in this episode, anybody on this podcast or not, please feel free to explain to me why I'm wrong and should feel bad.
Well, no one wants you to feel bad about anything, and that's kind of like
that's not
how
true.
I appreciate dialogue about, and to me, it's not just about race; it's about any group that's marginalized. You just deal with people on a basic level, a basic human level. You really don't have to worry about any landmines that might exist. You know, if you're an asshole, you're an asshole. Be an equal opportunity asshole.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. Just be respectful of people because they are people. But if you step out of line, I will definitely dig in your ass.
Please do.
I'm just teasing.
Yeah. So Chris's girlfriend is named Rose Armitage, played by Girls' Allison Williams.
That's another reason never to get in a car with anybody who's ever been in Girls.
It seems like a really terrible idea.
They're piling up those reasons.
She was really good. I mean,
she was amazing. She is super, super aggressive about not being racist, like ridiculously aggressive.
At what point in the movie did you two start to suspect that she was in on what was going on?
When she took him off for a walk.
And I think for me it might have been like I at least considered it as a possibility even in the first scene when she was, you know, just very, very calmly talking about her parents to Chris and saying they're not racist. It's okay. And I don't know, maybe that was just because, you know, having seen trailers and stuff for this movie, like, you know, at least vaguely that there's going to be something off and as the movie plays out and, you know, everything is so clearly fucked up at this house that you're like, okay, how did she not know about any of this? Surely she would be, you know, surely she doesn't stay that out of touch with her parents that all of this stuff happened since she left.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I think what the movie does so well is that it keeps what the hell is actually going on here hidden for so long that you don't know, like, how all this ties together. Like, there's clearly something off about the servants and the one black guy at the party.
Oh, that guy.
Everyone's saying things that would be viewed as positive racism about how great black people are. So there's just something that's horribly off about all this, but you have no idea what that off is, and you have no idea where any of this is going. Like, I had literally no clue what the end game for this movie was until it actually happened, and then watching it a second time, I'm like, oh wow, that is actually really well layered in.
Yeah, it was.
I would love to watch this again, knowing what happens.
To see where you can pick up like the clues.
Well, yeah, it's like
they're all littered throughout the entire movie, with the exception of the first act, I think. I was just thinking about the landscaper running in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Well,
and then the next day is like, I'm sorry if I frightened you with my exercising last night.
It's such a weird thing. It's like, well, maybe he's on the spectrum. So, like, you start to think in these terms, and then you go back after you find out what happens to Chris after the party, and the conversation they had during the tour of the house where he points to the picture of his dad. And it was just like, holy fuck, that was it was right there all along.
One of the most impressive pieces of acting in this is Georgina.
Yes.
Who, by the Lord, it turns out that she's actually has the brain of
the
Rose's grandmother in her head. And she's having this conversation with Chris where she's like, no, everything's fine. Everything's great. My experience here is wonderful. And she's crying the entire time that she does it. It's haunting.
And that's the thing that, like, I know this is going to be really good when we figure out what's actually happening.
Yeah, like whatever it is that this is a result of it, like it's got to be pretty bad.
Yeah, and the thing about I thought it was just like the hypnosis aspect of it, and
it really leads you to think that, but it turns out to be this whole other dimension you didn't even think about.
And then it's like, oh my god, it's a fucking sci-fi movie.
Yeah. This is we should mention this is a science fiction movie. Nobody else has.
Yeah, I was like, damn, I did not see that coming.
Yeah, not since The Prestige has there been such a sudden reveal that this is actually a science fiction movie.
Sterling Green is people. It was fun. That was a fun reveal too.
Yeah, but to get back to Allison Williams, she also has one of the most impressive pieces of acting in this movie, where she's like on the phone with Chris's friend. She's like,
can we talk about his friend too?
Oh no, we'll talk about him right after I'm finished with this. But where she's like, first she's like,
what the fucking A?
Yeah.
Because I was thinking like, her brother is like a weirdo, and then I was thinking like pot people, Invasion of Body Snatchers with them, and then when she like flips it when he cuts the phone on mute and cuts it back on, and she just like flips the script on him. Oh, that was so good.
Yeah, the thing is that she is at first like, well, she's pretending to, but panicking and like crying and freaking out.
I don't know where Chris is.
And then suddenly she's like, oh, you just want to fuck me. This is all about how you want to blah, blah, blah. And like every time it cuts back to her sitting at the table, her face is just dead. Like, oh, that is such a chilling and emotive performance.
It is.
In being not emotive.
And when she's in her room eating cereal without the milk, but the milk on the side.
This was kind of the funniest shot in the movie.
Well, there's a level of adolescence in that. It's like a weird, and some terrible stuff probably happened to them kids too.
Oh,
like they did some shit to those kids to the point I don't think they've ever progressed beyond whatever age they were in that photo that you see of them.
Yeah, I mean, Rose comes off as basically a sociopath. And
yes.
then her brother
is a psychopath.
Yeah, has literally no socialization skills whatsoever. Like, he can't even pass for mildly human.
Exactly.
That's what a lot of rich kids are like.
This is a completely different, and I think there's something in there, and it maybe it's just like me watching it and seeing something maybe that isn't there. But like I said, it seems like they've never progressed beyond their own, like even pre-adolescence in terms of his aggression and her deadness.
Yeah, they are sort of kids in a way.
Yeah, like so she's able to pull off that naivete very well because I don't think she sees herself like she's looking at these pictures of like on Google of like these athletes and stuff like that. Like it's like Teen Beat magazine. It's like super weird. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they were just damn good. Everybody's performance in this movie just completely nails what the movie was going for. Like you recognize every single character, but like there's a certain spin on those characters. Yeah, and just everybody just plays it so perfectly. It's really tight. The storytelling is very, very tight, and it's something else that I just like really appreciate. Yeah. I like when Chris is walking around with his camera, and he's taking pictures, and he happens upon Stephen Root's character, and there's like this interesting conversation that's going on between the two of them in terms of like what it's like to see and to know that Chris doesn't get the entire picture that's unfolding in front of his eyes is very telling. Yeah, because it seems like this is the one guy who's kind of cool. Yeah. In this whole place, the one guy who's not being super patronizing is like, oh, these other people are all idiots. And and then he turns out to be, in some ways kind of the final villain of the movie. Well, not even so much the final villain. I wouldn't say just somebody who is absolutely down with the bad shit that's happening here. Yeah, but it wasn't for, like he says, it's like, I don't care. He's like, I just wanted I wanted your eyes. Damn, actually, that's kind of fucked up in a sense that if you don't have talent, that you're so envious of someone else's talent that you would like do something like that drastic to take it away from them. But that's been happening to Black artists for like since they've been allowed to be artists or marketable people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, one of the interesting things about this movie is the fact that the two main people that are caught up in this are Chris, who is obviously a photographer, and Andre, who was a jazz singer. Like, they don't make a big point of being like, he was a jazz singer, a jazz musician. Mm-hmm. But like when they're Googling him, like that's what it is. Jazz musician vanishes in the suburb. Right. And I think it's also interesting that none of the people that they are abducting are like poor
basic people. Yeah.
Poor like people like living in the ghettos of the inner city. Like when we did Candyman, we talked a lot about Cabrini Green. The people that they're abducting are definitely not the residents of Cabrini Green. They're people in like these upper black middle class to upper class people. That's a commentary in and of itself. I mean, like I said, before Elvis existed, you had Chuck Berry, but Elvis became the king of rock and roll. That's notwithstanding, it's that institutional racism that is just as or even worse than that blatant racism that you see. Yeah. That's what I was taught growing up to be the most wary of, was that, okay, racism doesn't primarily manifest itself, as guys
guy in a pickup truck with a Confederate flag, screaming down the middle of the street calling for a lynching. It manifests itself in really, kind of subtle, very, very kind of hard to detect, very sort of presentable ways that are, that just manifest all across society. And of course, it turned out in 2016, it's like, no, the guy in the pickup truck is still very much a powerful force in today's world to be reckoned with, which I think is why that threw a lot of people, is because racism as overt as that just had not been the enemy for a long time, and it still isn't really the most powerful enemy.
It's just a different face to the same statue, you know what I mean? It's just...
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a no-win situation either way.
Yeah, I mean, this is a movie where they actually have an auction at one point.
Yeah.
And so it's outright stating that that all this stuff is a direct descendant from slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And that all these people who are constantly telling us how much they like black people are still part of the same system that presented slavery and benefiting from it.
Exactly.
Rose takes Chris to her family's house, which is a gigantic mansion because her mother is a psychotherapist and her father is a neurosurgeon.
Both of which are important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Talk about foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Yep. And of course, they can't go in the basement because the basement has black mold.
Also foreshadowing, if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And they meet Georgina and Walter, who are the family's two servants. Who are both black, but are very weird black people.
I mean, as soon as I rolled up in that place, I was like, look, I'm out. I gotta go.
Yeah.
If I saw those two people come up to me, I don't care where I am, I will walk away. I would walk my ass right back to Brooklyn, wherever Chris was from.
Georgina and Walter are both very polite and very mild-mannered, which isn't to say that black people can't be polite and mild-mannered, but...
They act very white, is the thing.
Well, it's not so much that they're very stiff and void of emotion. And I think that's startling. I don't trust people who do not speak in contractions. That's always a tip-off.
Or anybody who says cellular phone. Because that's the thing, is that it turns out that these are actually the people that we're actually hearing talking are like 70, 80, 90 years old.
Yeah. So
and that's what it is. That's why it feels so off.
That's why it feels off. Which is as another little nugget of foreshadowing that you get. So when you get to that, when you find out that these are actually the original couple of the house, it blows your mind.
One of the greatest bits of foreshadowing is that Rose's dad is they're walking in the kitchen and he goes, and the kitchen was my mother's pride and joy. And then Georgina's literally just standing there at the kitchen counter.
Yes. Well, for me, it was like the wig. It was like her adjusting it. So to me, because old ladies do that shit with their wigs. Yeah. But it's I still couldn't put the dots together. I just thought again, you have a movie that's a blender movie. So we've gone to slasher film setup to Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
And I think one of the interesting things about it is that we've talked a little bit about him before, but Chris has this friend Rod who works for the TSA.
Yes. Best character in the movie.
Rod is the audience.
Yeah.
Yes. That's why he's the best.
That's why he's the best.
He's just saying everything the audience is thinking. He's like, dude, get the fuck out of there.
He's this. Oh man, when he goes to report Chris missing, shout out to Maxine from Living Single. It was just really good to see her pop up again.
Yeah, she's great for the couple minutes that she's in the movie.
Yeah,
don't say I never do you any favors.
He's the least likely person because of a stereotype to figure it all out, and he becomes the hero of the story.
Yeah, I mean Rod is pretty much Randy from Scream, who.
Yeah, he's the one that knows what kind of movie this is.
Yeah.
Who's like, you need to get your ass out of there because
they're going to turn you into a sex slave.
Yeah. What is happening at this house is so far out of the bounds of reality that he obviously doesn't nail it, but he comes damn
He got
close.
damn close. I mean, he came damn close.
If anything, his explanation was a lot more plausible.
Yes.
Than what it turns out is actually
Then when it actually turns, oh my God. Have you guys ever seen The Thing with Two Heads?
I've never seen it. I've culturally osmosis a little bit.
Okay. Don't watch the original one. Watch the one with Raymond Land and Rosie Greer, because it'll give this film another dimension. Trust me.
I'll have to do that.
Let's do an episode on it.
Yeah, I love weird B movie like Roger Corman, but it's like Roger Corman meets like blaxploitation film. It's amazing. It has a moped chase in it.
Oh
Yes.
It's amazing. Right. He's basically, if you really want to get like really nerdy about it, he's also kind of like a Greek chorus.
Kind of, yeah. Because he's there to sort of respond and comment from a distance on everything that's happening throughout most of the movie.
And at that very end, it gets very Shakespeare. And I love that. I mean, this movie pulls from so many different sources and melds it all together in this very amazingly tight, perfect way. And I'm still like, I think I want to watch it again. I'm gonna give it maybe a few more weeks before I let it marinate before I watch it again.
I should definitely watch it again.
Yeah, Rod is the man. He's the TSA. Well, when he goes into that monologue about patting down an old woman, that's another thing about stereotypes. Is because we assume because she's an old lady she can't blow up a plane. You should never assume that.
There have been, in fact, older women terrorists and older women fighters that have been overlooked in the past. And like he's presented as this sort of comical character that's kind of, our initial impression of him is that he's kind of an idiot.
Yeah, he's a buffoon.
But he turns out to be right about literally everything, except for not realizing the extent of which all of this is actually heading to.
Well, the audience isn't clear on the extent of where this is all headed, because a normal person could never conceive of another person doing what these people have been doing to other people.
Yeah, it is horrifying, but the sex slave thing, hypnotized sex slaves, is fairly close.
It's fairly close. Well, with human trafficking, what else are you going to do?
Well, yeah, and it's roughly sort of what you're led to think is happening, because you're given these clues, like, okay, like she's a hypnotist, and like these characters are acting weird, so, like maybe they're like, maybe they are like hypnotizing them and like making them into slaves, and like that's sort of the way that you would naturally expect this movie to go, and that would lead to it making a different point than the one that it's ultimately making. But yeah, Rod is pretty close most of the time to at least what the audience thinks is going on, because neither he nor the audience could be expected to realize that the movie being John Malkovich is actually what's happening.
Another film. That's another one. I totally forgot. Especially with Kathleen Keener, I should have picked that one up. But again, we don't exactly have, but Rod doesn't have all of the information that we have in terms of the narrative too. So he does a damn good job of figuring it out.
And he's the one that's like actively investigating what all is happening here and is sort of on top of things, which is why he winds up being the hero in the end, kind of.
Totes.
Yeah, roughly, yeah.
But
he's the Dewey he goes from being the Randy of this movie to the Dewey of this movie.
Yep. Great analogy.
Rose and Chris are at her parents' house, and her dad really wants Chris to know how much he likes black people. And her mom is sort of embarrassed by this, but is pretty upset about the fact that Chris smokes. And then
nasty habit.
Oh God, it's just like
that's like his first really scary moment. Bradley Whitford's like first really scary moment, because he's been really affable throughout the whole thing, and he's like it's kind of whatever. He's being one of the guys, being a little over touchy feely, and then like they bring up smoking, and he's like I'm trying to quit, but you know how it is. He's like yeah, I know how it is. Nasty
and as
habit.
creepy as he is, he's not the one to worry the most about. The mom is the one that's the most terrifying out of all of them. And you get this always like the way she like her posture and the way she's watching him, and she's just like silently sizing him up, and it's really foreboding how that unfolds. And so like he sneaks out, and she's just sitting in the dark when he returns. Like how he didn't shit himself in that moment, I don't know, because I totally would have.
Rose's mom is horrifying, like terrifying, and even her brother, who is weirdly aggressive, is not as unsettling as her mother is.
Yes.
But like they get drunk at dinner, and Rose's brother shows up, and he keeps wanting to know about Chris's fighting skills. Does he like MMA? And then is like trying to like play fight him, kind of. It's super weird Chris, and uncomfortable.
I have a rule: I don't play fight the drunk guy.
We call it grab ass. You don't play grab ass at the dinner table. But yeah, that's also oddly foreshadowing when you come to the end of, but you know it's going to happen. You know that they're going to engage in a physical confrontation. So to see that build too, and it didn't happen the way that I thought it was going to happen, but it was still really satisfying when it happens. Anyway.
Yeah, and part of what this sort of lays in what is an underlying theme of this movie is the fact that white people think black people's bodies are way better than white people's bodies, because her brother is constantly mentioning Chris's genetics and frame and about how he could be the super strong fighter if he wanted to. Other people are like, black penises. Like the one woman literally is just like, is his penis great? Well, not literally.
Yeah.
She asks about his penis.
Yeah, that was kind of weird. An everyday conversation.
Yeah, and like the grandfather wishing that he could run like Jesse Owens. There's this whole thing about in the video in the final part about how like with our brains and your bodies we could do so much, which is
kind of it's like eugenics in a sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is incredibly unsettling, and it is something that is prevalent in society. Like, I can't remember what his first name is, but I feel like it's Roger Sterling, who is the owner of the NBA team. I think it was the LA Lakers who was forced to sell his team because of the fact that he said like a billion racist things.
Oh, it was the Clippers.
Oh, it was the Clippers, yeah. And like among them were about how great black people were at just being athletes.
Well, you're too young to remember Jimmy the Greek. And he said what you do is you get your big black studs and you get your Oprah and you get them to mate, and then they create an amazing athletic baby. Needless to say, Jimmy the Greek was fired after he said that. He was like an analyst for, I want to say CBS at the time. It was either CBS or NBC. This is like the late 80s or the late 80s or early 90s. Google Jimmy the Greek and see what pops up. But it was just like the most appalling thing that anyone could possibly said about anyone. And he said it like it was completely normal because a lot of people think that way, especially people of that generation.
The most racist thing I've ever heard said in person was my grandmother was with me and some of my brothers and sisters at a theme park. And you know, at some amusement parks, they have those basketball things. It's just like these basketball things. And we were walking by and there were some black guys who were using those. And as we were walking by, my grandmother was saying, you know, if I was black and I wasn't good at basketball, I would feel really bad about that. Well, my brothers and sisters were great because they were with me. They were like, "Don't just keep your voice down, please. Let's just keep walking."
Well, at least she said it. If I wasn't a woman, so I mean, she's not a self-hating woman, so I mean, you can glean that from your grandma. But you know, she's a product for her generation, and you know,
she is so a product for her generation.
There isn't much you can do about that. But what you can do is you can see how that affects your behavior and how you see things, because you don't have to think that way. And I think that's the thing that is lacking in the conversation. I read somewhere where someone said, it's not my job as a black person to educate you about being racist.
Yes. Yeah, I think I read that too.
You know, and it's like, it's on point. It's like, it's not my job. You know, you shouldn't have stereotypes about people you don't know. You know, if you deal with people on a basic level, like I said, you can avoid those minefields that exist or people think exist. Just don't be a dick. I mean, it's not a hard concept.
Yeah. And again, the more self-conscious you are about it, like the people in this movie, then the more wrong you're going to come across as.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that this movie is pretty clear on is that the whole thing about like, well, I'm not saying something racist because I'm being complimentary or I'm saying something positive is still pretty racist and degrading.
Yeah.
And just inaccurate because, okay, Chris does have a really nice body, but we were never given like any indication that he was athletic in any way.
Right.
Other than the fact that he worked out, clearly.
He kept it tight.
But like,
Chris was shredded.
Yeah, there's no indication that he plays any athletic sport. If anything,
actually, he does say that he played a little basketball.
But like, if anything, the stereotype about Chris should be that he's super artsy, since he's literally an artist. But everyone is sort of asking about his physicality as opposed to like anything that is relevant to him as an individual. And again, I think that's how like a lot of white people approach a lot of people of different cultures, is that we have have broad ideas about what their culture is and don't bother finding out about them individually until, like, in the most positive, best case scenario about just someone being mildly ignorant, put their foot in their mouth by saying making an assumption about someone, opposed to looking at who the person is and then going from there to build out what we might think their personality is.
That's why I think going to university, because that's a racket. I can't stand the way the United States implement their higher education system. But
pretty bad.
Because it's the only opportunity you have to interact with people outside of your sphere. Traveling, I mean, to me, if I were running this country, I would make travel mandatory, just because you don't realize how small your world is until you've been outside of it. Like, I went to Europe 8 years back, and I got to see places that I only read about. And I walked along the Colosseum, and I just started tearing up, because it's like, this is a place that has existed for thousands of years. This country's only existed for a little more than 300 years.
Yeah, we're an upstart.
This is a basement. This is a garage upstart. And
which is already falling apart.
Yeah, this is Napster.
We're the Napster
USA,
country.
you're Napster of countries.
We're so
But
the
yeah,
Napster.
to have that kind of realization that there are places that exist outside of the United States for thousands of years.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to New Orleans and San Antonio, which are two cities that are among the oldest in the continent. And I was like, wow, it's really, you can feel the history of these places. And I'm like, but that's really nothing compared to if you go to Rome, or if you go to Cairo, or
Giza.
Yeah, human history is so long and we've had so many cultures. And if you are capable of traveling, I think you need to take that opportunity. I've actually been saving up for an entire year now to go to Morocco and Kenya.
Cool.
And I've almost got enough money to do it. So it's you need to be able, with my parents, who are of a much older generation, they're retired, and I keep trying to get them to go to Japan. And then they're like, well, we don't want to go anywhere that they don't speak English. And I'm like, well, then go to Australia. And they're like, well, we don't want to go over the ocean. I'm like, well, where do you want to go?
Where do you want to go?
They go Vermont. I'm like,
that's the cradle of wasps. It's
the original wasp nest.
The original wasp hornet. That was just you want to talk about shithole? No.
They gave us Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Not a lot else.
my mom had
maple syrup.
Bernie Sanders and maple syrup. Yeah. That should be their state flag.
Bernie Sanders pouring
and a bottle of maple syrup.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mom had breast cancer and she managed to overcome it. And so my aunt asked her and said, all right, what is your bucket list thing that you want to do? What is the one place you want to go more than anywhere else in the world? So now they're going to Colonial Williamsburg this summer.
Oh, that's awesome.
I've been there.
That's pretty cool.
I love my mom to death, and I'm like, you know what? And actually, I'm happy that it's Colonial Williamsburg over Vermont, which is what they told me.
Yeah. So Colonial Williamsburg is pretty cool. But again, because we're a young country, but we still have our own history. I live in Philly. Declaration of Independence is 20 minutes from where I live.
Yeah, the Liberty Bell, just still there.
Yeah, it's funny because I have a friend who she's from Great Britain, and I was like, the Liberty Bell is so cool. And she kind of gave me this look and said, oh, you're cute. And it was just oh, fuck, you're from Great Britain. I'm nerding out about our history. And again, you don't realize how small your world is until you meet people who don't exist within it. And every person should be able to experience what it's like outside of their own sphere. So if it's Colonial Williamsburg or it's Vermont or something like that, it's somewhere outside of what they know. And that will always enrich you as a person because it gives you knowledge. It gives you experience. It gives you a different perspective. And it's always a good thing. And I'm glad your mom is on the mend.
The day after Rose and Chris arrive at her parents' house is this big party that they're told is in the honor of Rose's grandfather who died. And that all of Rose's grandfather's friends will be here. And it is the most messed up party you could possibly imagine. Because it is just endlessly people talking about Chris's body and about how awesome black people are and how not racist they are. And how apparently about how beauty is now fair skin has been beautiful for a while, or for 300 years, and now it's going back to black skin. I'm like, that's not really what's happening as far as I can tell.
Now it's in vogue to be black. Stop.
I'm gonna start tanning again.
It is.
Why couldn't all these people just go to a tanning booth?
Well, they roll up in these long black limousines, which I'm like is.
Yeah, that's a great shot. It's just when you look, they're arriving. He looks out, and it's just this endless stream of black cars just pulling into the drive.
I'm like, that looks like a funeral, dude. Get the fuck out.
And it kind of is, as it turns out.
And that's that's exactly what it is. And this is what this film does so well. It kind of has a tongue in it, firmly in the cheek about certain things. And then it goes into like this deep level, and you're sitting there like, oh my God, how is this going to end? Because you really don't know. You're really afraid for Chris.
Oh, yeah.
Everything about this movie is deeply unsettling in a way that you can't pen other than the fact that everyone's saying kind of racist things and like an attempt to not be perceived as racist.
Well, you've got like this weird, like you're in the middle of the woods again, another trope in your horror movie, like slasher movies. You've got like that weird wind that like kind of pops by just as like something sinister is about to go down. And it's just like, how are they going to, I mean, like, what exactly is going on? Is he going to die? Is he going to get kidnapped? Is he going to be a sex slave? Where is this going to go? And it takes us, a little while to get there, but when we get there, it's just like, it blows your mind away. It's just like, it's completely mind-blowing.
Yeah, and also at this party, there is one other black guest who is a young guy named Logan King, who is wearing, I don't even know how to describe his outfit. It's like something George Wallace would wear.
I would say old man clothes. He's totally just like an old man. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like a tip-off, too, when you find out exactly what happens to these people.
Yeah, and Logan has the line that I most want to see again, now knowing what the twist of the movie is, which is when the Japanese guy, I think, there's a guy there who's asking Chris, what do you think about the African-American experience in the modern world? Do you think is more, advantageous or disadvantageous? And Chris looks over at Logan as he's walking by and he says, hey, man, you can help me with this. What do you think about the African-American experience? And Logan just looks over and says, oh, well, I would say that for me so far, the African-American experience has been quite good.
Isn't that amazing? Like that completely went over my head for some.
Yeah. You don't think anything of it. Well, I mean, you do. You think that it's creepy and weird, but you later find out exactly what that means.
Yeah, and it just they floated that over so well. It's like I like tennis. I love watching tennis, and it is what we call a disguise forehand. You think that you're going to get a lob, and all you see is like the ball just coming with that top spin slice, boom. And when you get to like the point, is just like that was right there, and I don't know how I missed it because it was so well disguised. It was just like it was just so beautifully done. Like I definitely am going to watch this over again in the next couple of weeks.
You know who I really like in tennis is Serena Williams. Serena Williams, I think, is really one of the best tennis players that we've ever had.
She is redunculous. But I know it's like when your Jimmy the Greek references that I made earlier that was not yours.
Yeah, but Chris is disturbed, would probably be the best word to say.
Yeah.
By Logan's actions and tries to sneak a picture of him with his camera phone, but the flash goes off.
And then hell breaks loose.
Yeah, which Logan starts bleeding from the nose and like rushes at Chris and starts screaming at him to get out, get out, get out. And then everyone sort of tackles Logan and takes him to a different room. And Chris and Rose and a few other party guests are in the living room. And Rose's father comes out and says, oh, he had a seizure. No big deal. And it's sort of interesting because of the fact that how did you interpret Logan saying get out all those times?
Well, for me, it's...
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I mean...
No, I was thinking, for me, it was like he finally woke up. But still, I'm still unclear how that actually works if you had like that kind of, the transference. Because the hypnosis, how does it work in those terms? So I'm still operating, as I'm watching, under the idea that is a suggestion, because that's all hypnosis is all about suggestion. And like the whole deal with the China teacup and saucer and the cadence of the spoon hitting on the side. So it makes people...
Never has tea been creepier than in this movie.
Oh, geez. And the whole tea metaphor that we see around now in terms of being woke and sipping your tea and blah, 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 blah. So I think that's like an interesting like add on to that.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that.
So I just assume that he was awakened from like that deep suggestive state that he was in, and that they just reprogrammed him. So, I don't know how to like the consciousness. And then I think when we go to the end where they explain how you're kind of there, but you're not there. You're like seeing everything outside and you can't do anything. You can't move. The dark place. Or it's a specific name she called the sunken place.
Mm.
That to me, and then we have all these limos, these black limos, and the sunken place. It's like a death, a living death. And to me, that's what makes it creepier than anything else that you see in this movie.
Yeah, and what I was thinking about after what Peter said, which is why I had that orgasm like a minute ago, was you assume in the scene that he's saying "get out" to Chris, as in you have to get out. But in retrospect, it's entirely possible that he was voicing his first conscious thought upon being awoken, in whatever capacity he still exists in there. That the parentheticals there is I have to get out.
Wow.
Yeah, so like he's awoken from this state that he's in by the Flash, and kind of comes back to reality, and then immediately he's like, get out, get out, get out. Get out. And like I didn't even think about that, but I think that ambiguity is really deliberate.
Yeah, I didn't think about that either.
It's not clear why, however you take it, it's not clear if Logan is talking to himself, if Logan is talking to, when we eventually find out what happens, if Logan's talking to the person that has taken over his mind, if Logan is talking to Chris, and if Logan is talking to Chris because he's angry, or Logan's talking to Chris because he's worried, or giving a warning. It's very ambiguous. It all depends on whether this is the first time you're watching it, or if you know what's actually happening here. But yeah, Chris freaks out, and he has a relative or something who has seizures and is not at all convinced by Rose's father's explanation. But she convinces him to stay. And Rose is basically gaslighting Chris throughout this entire movie.
Yeah.
Because she's like, no, everything's perfectly fine.
And that naivete that she has, it pulls him in. Like, it does exactly what she intends it to do. She snows him, and it's just like, oh man, dude, you are screwed.
I forget if it's that night or the night before. Chris comes into the entire movie. They've been talking about Rose's mother's hypnosis skills,
right?
And he comes in from smoking, and she is attempting to have a conversation with him while she's drinking tea, and just is the spoon hitting the side of her teacup the whole time that she's talking. And it very subtly reveals that he has basically been put into a hypnotic state where he's reliving his mother's death. The backstory is the fact that he didn't have a father, really, but his mother died in a car crash when he was young, and that's sort of why, or that seems to be why he doesn't have his driver's license. But so she's pulling out of him that when his mother got into an accident, he was watching TV while it was raining and didn't react to his mother's accident in any capacity because he was afraid that it would be, quote, real if he did. And then she tells him to sink into the floor, and he goes to this sort of starry void where he's looking at her through a TV screen.
He becomes 11.
Yeah, it is, again, it's super creepy and super weird.
Well, it's like he's drowning, and that scene is so good. It happens so early on, because the trailers make it seem like something that it isn't. And when you get to that point, and his acting is so amazing in that scene where he's telling the story of his mother, and the way his eyes tear up, and he gets into that moment, and then she suddenly says, "You sink," or something like that. It's it was the way the cadence of her voice. Yes, it was just that scared the shit out of me. I didn't know what was going to happen to him after that. And then it phases into him, cuts, and he's in the bed, and you can't tell whether or not it was a dream that he had or was real. The only clue was that he had on the same clothes as opposed to being shirtless at the beginning of the scene. The prior scene.
Yeah, it is unsettling to say the least. And it's one of those things where we as an audience know that something fucked up happened, but he's being gaslighted by Rose the entire time about how his mother couldn't have done this. And it's just this horrible violation of his own consciousness, which is what this movie is about ultimately.
it's ultimately about having free will taken away from you. And
which is slavery.
Yeah, I was about to finish that thought. In deference to someone else benefit. So yeah, and not only just physically, but like mentally too. Like the way we're all slaves to our phones and our computers, and we freely give away our information to the government through social media. We give up freedom for the sake of freedom, which makes no sense because it's counterproductive. And I think that racism is counterproductive.
Yeah,
and
I think that's what's so appalling about it.
Yeah,
is that it's just there's so many amazing things as a civilization that we could accomplish, and racism among many other things, and kind of prejudice in general just drags that down, and just replaces all of that with so much suffering and so much horrible things, and that's part of what's so abhorrent about it, is that it all seems so stupid and so petty.
Well, it's not. It's designed to do exactly what it does. It's designed to keep people in power in power. It keeps us fighting each other so we don't recognize the fact that the people in power basically are fucking it up for everybody else. And the best way to do it is to give one group some semblance of likeness in contention with otherness. So the belief is that you one day can join us in this power. So we'll give you a little bit. We'll let you benefit from some of what we do as long as you keep them at bay. You make sure that they don't get ahead. You know what I mean? And ultimately, that's why we're here where we are. This planet is going to die in I would say a few generations from now. It doesn't have a lot of time left.
Yeah, the way things are going.
The way things are going. I mean, the change has to start now. That's the only way. You can't change how your grandparents think. You can't change how your parents think. You can change how you think. You can try to, if you have kids, you can try to instill in them certain values to help them become better citizens and people of the world. Now is the time. Now is the crucial time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's really nice to have pieces of media like this movie that are so smart about this stuff and can be so and can talk about it in such a powerful way,
but not heavy-handed.
Just to get these ideas, just to get these ideas out there in a way that people will be willing to absorb. Which means that it doesn't come across as preachy or as moralizing. It makes you feel concern, and it makes you feel upset, and it makes you feel a sense of injustice.
Or at least it should.
Yeah. I mean, some people it's never going to make feel those things. Our president, I would say, but he didn't watch this movie.
No, I think it's a little too highbrow for him.
He's like, I don't like to be told that I have to think by my movies, or really by anyone,
unless
by
I'm in them,
by my secretaries,
or somebody pays me to do it.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, there's no sure solution to anything. I mean, if there were, we wouldn't be here. So sorry, we derailed the train again.
No, it's important.
The following day, Chris is finally basically done with all of this, particularly when he shows the picture of Logan to Rod and is informed that it's actually Andre who went missing. And so he tells Rose that we're going to be leaving today. And he finds like a secret room or a secret door in the room that he's been sharing with Rose, where she has many, 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 many photos of her with black people, even though supposedly he is her first black boyfriend. And she keeps like fiddling through her purse being like, oh my god, I can't find my keys anywhere.
Where are my keys? I can't find the keys.
Like there are some in my purse, but I can't even find them.
Oh my globby guys.
Guys, where are my keys? Does anyone see my keys anywhere?
You did such a really good. Yeah, I was about to say you did a really good. Who's the? Oh god damn it! I lost my train of thought. I want to say square pegs, but it's not square pegs. Ugh, never mind. So you know what? I can't remember, because was that door open twice in the movie when at the point where Chris wants to leave? Wasn't there a time that door was open before, but he didn't go through it?
I think you're right. I think wasn't it open like the first night that he was there at some point?
Because I thought maybe Georgina had left it open so he could find the box. But then when we found out who Georgina actually is, I was like, nah, that probably didn't happen. But it was weird that door was open again, and that was the time he decided to go and check it out.
But Rose can't find her keys, and she finally just admits to him, or she has her keys, and she's like, we're not leaving. And
yeah, well, he realizes at first because he's screaming at her, and she's screaming back. He's like, come on, the keys, the keys, the keys, the keys. And then it suddenly hits him. He's like, Rose, where are the keys? And she's like, they're right here.
It's like the denial.
No, he still has feelings for her at the end of the movie, which is insane to me.
Well, he tells her, you're the only thing I have. I mean, in a weird sense, when people all they have left is their belief in something, and he believed in her, it is very hard to disabuse yourself of that belief. And that's kind of what racism is. The not having a wherewithal to disabuse yourself of the belief that you are superior to someone else because you are of a certain color. And it's like that's kind of like my takeaway from that thing, where obviously if someone gaslit me the way that she gaslit him, I would have enjoyed killing her to the utmost. But
he still can't.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's just like I would have made sure she was dead. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think he definitely should have made sure she was dead, but he still has feelings for her in the end.
Yeah, it's
he makes the same mistake that all those blonde girls make in other horror movies. Check to see if the bad guy is dead.
Check to see if the bad guy is dead. Yes.
Cut their head off.
Yes, what
moving the head
hat,
or
right?
destroying the brain. It's pretty simple.
But he gets attacked by Rose's brother, and then Rose's mom just literally just pulls out the tea again, and is just like, sleep. And he collapses.
Does it seem like he didn't really intend to kill either Rose or her brother, but he definitely intended to kill the parents?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he left. We'll get to it. And then when he wakes up, he's strapped into a chair in the basement that no one was allowed in earlier, with this, like, everything's paneled with wood. There is a deer's head on the wall.
It's super creepy.
Yeah.
Because it's still just a basement. There's like a ping pong table and a foosball table. It's still just these people's rec room.
Yeah, where they do
But it's also this torture dungeon.
Yeah. Oh, man, it's so creepy.
It's all very Rosemary's Baby, in a way.
Yes.
They're still like normal old people. They're just also doing really fucked up shit.
That's the Kubrick shot. That's what I always call it. Like the Kubrick, like when you go into the hallway and it's shining, like, come play with us.
Yeah.
That is like, I call that the Kubrick. It's super creepy because it seems so normal, but it's so many fucked up things going on inside.
Yeah, and he's looking at an old-timey TV.
A console television.
Yeah, like one of the huge ones. My grandparents had a TV like that.
Although later they somehow Skype somebody into that TV. I don't really know how that goes.
We could like live with that a little bit of anachronism.
Yeah, that's fine.
But yeah.
Considering, what he's gone through to get to this point, he's gonna let it slide on that note. And it's a blind man, so it's like, who the fuck is he looking at?
Yeah.
But no, it's like this creepy video comes in, and it reminds me of like all of these terrible like film shows I had to watch growing up when I was in school. It was just like the whole vibe was weird as fuck. It was pretty amazing though.
Yeah, because it's so cheesy. It's so cheesy and dated, but it's this video made by this cult explaining why the person watching it is about to be sacrificed.
Yes.
Well, and there's like stock photos of butterflies.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that part of like the suggestion, like the programming too? Because like it's all in patterns, so it conditions the brain to see certain things in terms of like movement and sound and light. So I mean, it's like that's genius to have it presented in that way. But we learn that he's like the creator of this method, right?
That Rose's grandfather formed the society to figure out how to do this, which again they don't even actually explain at this point what exactly is happening. But they created this process that was then perfected by his children, who were a neuroscience and a hypnotherapist, and that step 1 was hypnotizing the subject, and then step 2 was reconciling them to what was going to happen, and then like he is put back into the sunken place, I believe, next.
Yeah.
And for a little while they prep for the surgery, and then we get a little bit of surgery from them cutting off the top of the head of Stephen Root, and it goes back to him. Yeah, I think it goes back to him where he's watching a video of Stephen Root explaining, well, what actually happens is that we take the brains of white people and put them in black people's bodies, but we can't take away all of them, so the brainstem is left attached, and you'll still be there, but you'll just be a passenger in your own body.
Which is a living
Fate
coffin.
worse than death if there ever was one.
Yeah, because you're a prisoner of your own body.
Yeah, and so we are definitely in a sci-fi movie. They can just transplant in people's brains into new bodies.
I'm telling you, the thing with two heads is definitely something they drew from, but in like a sci-fi, like kind of like a more sophisticated sci-fi context. Because the thing with two heads, they literally just slap Raymond Land's head on Rosie Greer's body, and it's amazing. Especially when he gets these pork chops. Never mind. That's a spoiler alert. It's amazing. Just watch it.
When I first watched this, I at no point expected them to actually be doing brain transplants.
Yeah, like I said, I thought it was just like they were conditioned to the point where they didn't exist. So, I mean, they didn't have any free will, that they were completely ruled by like suggestion that made them compliant to whatever situation they were going to end up in. I did not see brain transference coming. And when it happened, it was just like my mind exploded. My brain just exploded. It was so well disguised.
And I didn't see it coming at all.
Yeah.
And yet it makes 100%
It makes one just yeah.
If anybody did see that coming, I would be very interested.
And how?
How? Yeah, and maybe check that person into a psych ward because they're probably a sociopath.
John Wayne Gacy would have picked it up in a second.
I mean, that guy was perceptive.
Sure, that's what we're saying now.
If there are two things that John Wayne Gacy is known for, it is being a serial killer and his excellent understanding of the nature of narrative structure in literature.
Hey.
You know, when I got up this morning, I had a certain expectation for what I would do today, and I really didn't think that complimenting John Wayne Gacy on his remarkable perceptive abilities was going to be one of them. But that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes.
Well, you have to have a degree of perception to be a serial killer, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to get away with it. You wouldn't be a serial killer. You'd be an attempted serial killer because you immediately get caught. He didn't get caught for years, and then when they did catch him doing something he wasn't supposed to do, he got paroled. He was like a member of like city council or some shit. Like he was like, everybody thought he was a regular dude. So he was perceptive enough to deceive people. So I stand by my John Wayne Gacy compliment. Okay, I didn't think I would say that statement today.
You know what? Sometimes when you just start talking, you never know where you're going to end up, and you accidentally wind up complimenting John Wayne Gacy.
Yeah.
I need to go listen to that Sufjan Stevens song, Clear My Head.
Part of the mistake that the Armitage family makes is the fact that when Chris found out his mother was dead, he gripped the armchair that he was sitting in really, really hard. So every time they hypnotize him, he's putting his fingernails through the chair that they've tied him to. So he realizes that there's stuffing coming out of the side. So there's a cut to, they show the teacup again, and then they cut to Rose's brother coming in to take him away for surgery, only after he unties Chris and is starting to get the wheelchair ready, Chris grabs a bocce ball, because there are those in the
Yeah.
He grabs a bocce ball and beats Rose's brother in the head until he's unconscious. And then he grabs the stag's head off the wall and uses it to gore Rose's father to death. He winds up going upstairs, and of course he meets Rose's mother, and the teacup is literally directly in between them. So
yeah, they both just dive for it.
Yeah.
It's pretty
But he breaks
and then
it.
she stabs him with a pair of scissors
And
through his hand, which is...
uses it to poke her eye out.
I know. Now we get into like zombie territory.
Yeah, at which point Rose's brother pops back up again, and he winds up stabbing him in the leg and sets fire to their house. Yeah, no, this whole section is pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's I call it the Django act. No, mostly that's just kind of a joke, but I want to go back to when Chris impales Rose's dad with the stag head. So that looks like a buck, right? Like, So one of the euphemisms for like huge black or like ripped black dudes is buck.
Oh.
So that's a little cultural, nod. in terms of terminology used when referring to black men. And the fact that he's been killed by a buck, I think, is a very powerful statement. It's very, very subtle. If you're in a know, it's a very powerful statement.
It's really cool.
Yeah, I did not pick that up, and now that you're laying it down, I'm totally seeing it, and it is really cool. He grabs the car keys, gets in the car, and then immediately runs over Georgina.
Yeah.
Poor grandma.
No, not poor grandma.
She was a psychopath, but yeah.
How about no?
Grandma got ran over by
with John Wayne
reindeer.
Gacy, I will abide, but this...
Yeah, he runs over Grandma.
But he didn't intentionally. Well, yeah, he didn't, because he didn't know that was Grandma. But
then he goes, and then he has the moment where he's like, just go, just go, just go. And then for some reason decides, hey, I'm going to take the person that I'm almost 100% certain is a white person who abducted a black person's body to use and put her in the car with me and then drive away.
Well, but he knows that she's still in there somewhere because he knows that they all are. And he was thinking about his mother. And that was a big thing, was that he felt like he was doing nothing while his mother died, that he was watching TV when he found out.
Oh, crap.
So he wanted to, he didn't want to drive away and feel like, he could have done something but chose not to.
It's
so
deer all over again.
Even though it absolutely put his life in danger again, he was like, no, I gotta do this. I gotta see if she's okay.
Yeah, and of course it turns out with her crashing his car.
Yeah, because she's like, you wrecked my house!
Which she's
like, not you killed my family, just you messed up my house.
Well, she did take pride in that kitchen. But no, I was just thinking, like, his inability to move, like when he found out about his mom, and we were talking about the deer from before, it's the same situation. He didn't do anything about that deer. And it was that also foreshadowed this moment where he sees Georgina in the middle of the, I just thought of it as we were talking about it. We were talking about deer symbolism, and it isn't until we realize what his entire story is that we realize that that is a significant moment that foreshadows what happens. That seems like it's going to be his undoing, because it makes him vulnerable to the not so dead Rose with big ass shotgun.
Yeah, because they crash the car and Georgina dies, and as he's getting out of it, Rose comes by with a shotgun and is just shooting at him, and her grandfather runs up and attacks him. But fortunately, we know what to do if we're being attacked by a white person who's hijacked a black person's body, which is you take
this piece of mechanics has been well established.
Which is you take a flash picture of them, and they revert back to being a nice black person.
That's just something that everybody knows.
It is so simple.
Like, I mean, we've talked about the dangers of landlines so many times. I think we need to explain that if there is a white person who's hijacked a black person's body, you take a flash photo of them.
The more you know.
No. Ding!
It's a lesson it's a lesson we can use every day in our lives.
It's really the main lesson of this movie.
Now I'm thinking of Strangers with Candy again. If I learned anything, I've learned nothing at all.
Yeah, so Walter asks Rose for the shotgun so he can kill Chris, and instead he just turns around and shoots her right through the stomach. And
Surprise!
And then shoots himself in the head. And
yeah, that was like, dude, you could have been going back to whoever you were before. Nah.
Well, probably not. The thing.
Not, yeah.
Again, they said that they only leave like a tiny bit of the original brain left, so he probably couldn't have.
Yeah, and then Chris strangles Rose for a little while, but just it's like, okay, I'm done with that, and lets her live.
Yeah, he had that Othello moment, that Shakespearean seminal piece about interracial relationships.
That's why that game is like one side is black and one side is white for each of the pieces.
No, I don't know. That's probably racist too. Racist game. But yeah, we had like that Othello moment. You know what's crazy to me? The fact that Jordan Peele is married to Chelsea Peretti. I just love that to pieces.
Yeah, I just found that out like a little bit after watching this movie, because I was reading about it. I was like, oh, no shit.
Yeah, I found out like when she got pregnant. So you can see like a lot of commentary about like his relationships as far as probably dating white women too. And it's like bleeding into the, and that creates a narrative, and it's so well done. I mean, like I said, it's not heavy handed, and it's like this is all of the bullshit I got put up with because I love this person.
But then a flashing car comes by, and you think it's a police car, but it turns out to be Rod from the TSA. Come here to save Chris.
I was so scared that it was gonna. I thought that because that seemed like such a perfectly downer note to end this movie about race on, is that then the police come and arrest the black guy who was the victim.
It's like it kind of redeemed Night of the Living Dead for me a little bit. Because you had a black man surviving a zombie attack only to be killed by the cops in the end. So I was like, oh man, this cop is going to shoot him. He sees him choking his white woman, and now she's shot and blah, blah, blah. And then who is it? It's Rod.
Yeah, I mean, originally, apparently, Jordan Peele had written the ending to be that the cops show up and shoot Chris, but then decided that was way too much of a downer note.
Yeah, that's pretty dark.
But it is Rod here to save the day, and they drive away, and Rod basically gives Chris an "I told you so" speech.
Yeah.
Which is like the best like monologue.
And it's great because it's so just shows that they're friends, because like in a weird way that's exactly what he needed right then.
And he gets to see that he has more than he has more than what he thought he had, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's actually like really good. I'm glad that he didn't, because if he had the cops shoot Chris in the end, then it would have been a heavy handed. It would have been, I think it would have totally undid everything that he built up until that point. So that was a good call.
Yeah, it wouldn't have really fit with the main theme of the movie any more than, aside from just the general fact that it's a movie about racism. But, again, it's more about the fetishization of black people than the hatred of them exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most of this movie is about, again, people who don't think of themselves as racist being super racist, and how all of the stuff that, again, people who don't think they were racist would derive from slavery.
Yeah.
Slavery and Jim Crow and histories of segregation and the urbanization of the inner cities, white flight, all that sort of stuff, all continue to impact even people who really like Tiger Woods.
Yeah, and we find out
Tiger Woods enough to constantly just call him Tiger.
Yeah.
It's like, I know Tiger.
Yeah, whereas then it would be like a one... Well, I mean, this is obviously something we could all agree is... Well, actually, no, it isn't something we would all agree is racist, but it would take away from all of the stuff that had been carefully layered in throughout the first...
Yeah.
Throughout the majority of the movie, to then have something that is just as overtly racist as the cops shoot a black man who is the victim of a crime.
Yeah.
Exactly, but teasing that possibility, I think, does really fit with the movie. Like, having you think for a second, like, oh shit, that's how it's gonna end. That really works. But then doubling back on that, I think, was absolutely the right thing to do.
Yeah. Well, thematically, and just because it is kind of a genre bender, it works well because it fits within the trope of having the main character survive everything to live the next day. So it fits in line with that. So I'm glad that he didn't go the other route, because I think it totally did the entire film a disservice if he did.
I agree.
All right, and that is the end of the movie. So what final thoughts do people have about Get Out?
Don't go up to like insanely rich white people's house unless you've got a danger stranger buddy or something like that.
Really, no matter what race you are, it's generally ill-advised.
Yeah.
Or so if you're not white, but I feel like I would probably be in trouble.
Like, I feel weird just walking into like a Tiffany's, like I don't belong in there. Even if I have money to buy something, it's like they probably don't. I don't feel comfortable in here. I don't, you can keep your silver.
It's like Billy Connolly used to say that it's like he would try and like that every time he bought a nice thing to wear, it looked like he stole it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they do talk about that in the movie where he's like, yeah, I just don't feel comfortable when I'm around this many white people.
Yeah.
Seriously, though, it's just that it's possible to make a film like this. You don't have to be heavy-handed with your subject matter. You can, if you are a fan of films, you can take what you've learned from watching films and put it in a cohesive way that makes it fun and feel and innovative. It doesn't feel stale. It's fresh. And I mean, you could have, I don't know, you didn't really have to use race as a narrative for this kind of movie, and it still would have worked, I think. So yeah, it's just like I would be excited to see more films treated with this same respect that this movie was treated with. Obviously, respect and love. Like, this was like someone who loves films made this movie, and it comes through.
Yeah, I mean, and what's great about this is that it is a movie that is in a genre that's marginalized. It is made by a first-time movie director. Well, maybe not first time, but a person who has...
Didn't they do Keanu?
Yeah, I forget who directed Keanu, but it's someone that has had limited experience directorially, who is making a movie that is on a fairly steep budget. It was $4.6 million, I believe, budgeted, and then made $250 million.
So this is basically Roger Corman's progeny, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of.
And then it could wind up nominated for a whole bunch of Academy Awards.
I would be more proud of a Saturn Award than I would be of an Academy Award for this film, because it is a great horror film.
Like, and it does everything that horror does so well, because there's so much tension and everything is so unsettling, and we've complained about jump scares before. There aren't any jump scares in this.
Well, there's that one shot of in the background when Chris is walking around that first night. You see Georgina walk past him in the background, and that's accompanied by a stinger. Yeah, like that's the only thing that's even kind of a jump scare.
I totally forgot about that.
And it got me. I was like,
yeah.
Oh yeah, and then later, Georgina, later in that scene when he's outside and he sees her at the window, but she doesn't see him because there's light inside and there isn't outside, and it cuts to inside, and she's just admiring herself in the reflection.
Yeah.
And like at the time, you're like, what's up with that? And then again later, that makes total sense. I mean, I loved this movie. I thought it's a really powerful movie. It's a very, that is discussing a lot of stuff that's really relevant and really important right now. And then even aside from that, it is a great horror movie. It's really scary. It's really intense. It's really unpredictable, and parts of it are very, very funny. So it makes a really fun sit. It's a pretty all around kind of amazing movie.
All right. So what do you think the chances are that it's going to win any of those Academy Awards?
Well, I mean, it's not going to win Best Picture.
I don't think he's going to get Best Director. Wasn't it up for Best Original Screenplay too?
Yes. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, and Best Original Screenplay. I think screenplay is the one that has the best chance. I think
that's the best one. I think Daniel's probably gonna lose to Gary Oldman.
Yeah, which kind of sucks.
But it's predictable, and that's exactly what the Academy is all about.
Yeah, because that award would be the one that I think I would be most inclined to give this movie. Because I don't know if I would say this is my favorite movie of last year. It's certainly one of the best movies that came out last year, but I don't think I would say it's the best movie that came out last year. But his performance might be the best lead performance of a movie that came out last year that I saw. So the fact that it probably won't win that is what's the most sad to me.
Yeah, he's up against both Gary Oldman and Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah, Daniel Day-Lewis and his retiring performance. That's pretty rough.
Yeah. It's like Meryl Streep. She's gonna win that one. Is she up for one?
Probably.
So.
It's fairly, I mean...
Not to take anything from it, because I love Meryl Streep, but, it's kind of like, unless you've done something, like, really, 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 really good, Meryl Streep is probably going to win.
Yeah, it's kind of the way it goes. Did James Franco not get nominated?
No, he did not. The nominees are Timothée Chalamet for...
Call Me By Your Name.
Yeah, Call Me By Your Name, Daniel Day-Lewis for Phantom Thread, Daniel Kaluuya for Get Out, Gary Oldman for Darkest Hour, and Denzel Washington for Roman J. Israel Esquire, that movie that no one went to.
Because he looked like Al Sharpton before
that's bullshit too. James Franco's performance in Disaster Artist was amazing, and I know we're not allowed to like James Franco anymore, but that movie's still really good.
I've never liked James Franco, so
I've never liked James Franco either. He was terrible in the Spider-Man movies.
I like him all right in the Spider-Man movies, and I like him in Freaks and Geeks, but I've never been a James Franco guy. But I think
the only thing I love him in Pineapple Express, and I admit mostly because he's watching 227.
I kind of liked him in This Is the End, but I have a weird soft spot for that movie as a whole.
Yeah, that's just a vanity piece.
I know, but I like the fact that they get beat up by Emma Watson.
But there is like it's a very horrific thing to watch in terms of, you know, you realize that she's only at this point maybe like 23 or something like that. So to me, it was a little disturbing. But yeah, I had no desire to see Disaster Artist because why would I want to watch a movie about a shitty movie?
Dude, it's so good. It's such a good movie.
I do that all the time. Where's my Oscar? You know, I make fun of.
I mean, The Room is kind of amazing too, but even if you haven't seen that, The Disaster Artist I think is really worth watching. But that's just
I've seen pieces of The Room, and it's just like, yeah, no. If that's the case, I think Showgirls was a better like mockable movie that didn't, you know, that was made seriously, but turned out to be an amazing comedy.
Everybody got AIDS and shit.
Yeah, in the Room. Everyone had AIDS in Room. The Room or whatever it is.
Yeah, The Room.
Okay. See, I don't even know what the plot is. It's just like a lot of people.
There isn't
talking.
one.
It was weird. It was like watching a Dolomite movie where people was like, you know what? We got an afternoon. Let's make a movie. I got a couple cameras. We got a boom mic, and every time the screen scene is being done, you can see the boom mic come down. To me, that's what that movie kind of seems like. Everybody just got together.
That's not quite what it is. The Room is entertaining not because it's poorly made. I mean, it is, but it's entertaining because it's strangely made. And the dialogue is bad, but it's bad in a way that no other dialogue is bad. It's just the standard description for it is that it's like a movie made by an alien who just had just a cursory understanding of basic human interaction and the English language. And so watching it, your immediate thought is, how did this happen? What conflagration of circumstances took place for this particular movie to be birthed into the world? And The Disaster Artist answers that, and I think it's also just a kind of compelling movie about movie making.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, I do think Dave Franco was miscast in that movie, and I will go to my grave thinking that.
What movie is Dave Franco not miscast?
I don't think that movie's been made yet. All right, so let's move on to our final segment, Best Death. So who got the best death in Get Out?
Probably Bradley Whitford. Death by buck or death by deer is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that was like the Schadenfreude. The German word for
Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude. Yeah, that was probably
Schadenfreude.
Yeah, I'm terrible at German. Okay, I would say that, but my favorite one is probably not the best one, but my favorite one is Georgina.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
Because it's redonkulous.
Well, I think
it's one of those things where you try to do a good thing and it just like no good deed goes unpunished. Like that's kind of reinforced.
Yeah.
Oh, well, all of them are pretty spectacular. I like how they all come within like a 5-minute window.
Yeah, it was very quick.
When this movie is a very, very slow boil, but once it boils, it boils.
Yeah.
And there is blood and flames and people being shot everywhere.
Bocce balls and teas and scissors and oh man, that was horrific though. Actually, now I think about it.
Is there a more white sport than bocce?
I thought it was a croquet ball. So that's what to me is the most white sport is croquet because I still don't know what the hell it is. It's like lawn pool or something.
What's the one where you hit a birdie back and forth?
Badminton.
Badminton's pretty white.
No, that's pretty Asian.
Oh, yeah, I guess
because it's
true.
Huge in Asian countries. And, especially, like, there's a rivalry, I think, between, like, Korea and I want to say China. Like, they are, like, seriously into it. Like, the tournaments are insane.
I knew they were really into ping pong.
Yeah.
Or Japan. Ping pong is a really big thing in Japan.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And what about you, Peter? What was your favorite death?
I have to go with Rose's father being impaled by the deer. Although I want to give a special shout out to when he's cutting off Stephen Root's head and he's literally just throwing the body parts.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. That skull cap, like, oh man, that was so creepy and gross.
All right, well, thank you for listening to this episode of Dead Times on Get Out. April,
kind of our downer episode, but I think that was kind of destined to be.
April, is there anything you would like to plug?
No, not really. I'm just gonna say thank you for inviting me to talk about a bunch of nonsense and to talk about a really great film. I appreciate it, and hopefully we can do it again in the future.
Yeah,
pleasure is all ours.
Anytime you want to come on, you're more than welcome to. All right, so thank you for listening. I'm Peter.
I continue to be Tim.
And I'm April.
Have a great night. Bye-bye.
So long.
See ya.